The night sky has watched over countless civilizations, yet we believe ourselves to be the first to truly understand its mysteries. We construct our timelines with such confidence, placing humanity's rise in neat little boxes spanning just a few thousand years. Agriculture began here, writing started there, the wheel was invented at this precise moment. It's a comforting story of steady progress, of our species climbing methodically from caves to cities to skyscrapers. But what if that story is wrong? What if the very ground beneath our feet holds secrets that would shatter everything we think we know about our past? Welcome to a journey into the shadows of history, where evidence whispers of civilizations that rose and fell long before our recorded time began. I'm here to guide you through mysteries that mainstream archaeology prefers to ignore, anomalies that don't fit the official narrative, and discoveries that suggest we are not the first intelligent civilization to call Earth home. Tonight, we'll explore the possibility that humanity has walked this path before, that great cities have risen where now only ocean waves roll, that technologies we consider modern were perhaps known to minds that vanished millennia ago, that the myths our ancestors told weren't fantasies, but memories of a world that was. If you find yourself drawn to these hidden histories and forgotten mysteries, consider joining our community of truth seekers. Your support helps us continue uncovering the stories that conventional wisdom would rather keep buried. Now, let us descend together into the depths of time, where the most profound secrets lie waiting in the darkness. The first clue that our understanding of the past might be incomplete comes not from dusty archaeological sites, but from beneath the waves themselves. Picture yourself standing on a boat, looking out over the endless blue of the Pacific Ocean near Japan. The surface appears calm, ordinary, giving no hint of what lies hidden far below. But descend into those depths, past where sunlight can reach, and you'll encounter something that challenges everything we've been taught about ancient humanity. Rising from the ocean floor like a forgotten temple is a massive stone structure. Not a natural formation sculpted by currents and time, but something that bears the unmistakable marks of intelligent design. Terraced platforms step upward in perfect geometric precision. Walls meet at exact 90-degree angles. Corridors and chambers are carved with mathematical accuracy that would impress modern engineers. This is Yonaguni, and it shouldn't exist. At least, not according to our current timeline of human development. The structure has been submerged for at least 10,000 years, dating back to when our ancestors were supposedly just learning to farm. Yet here stands evidence of sophisticated architecture, of minds capable of planning and executing monumental construction projects. Mainstream archaeology insists this must be a natural formation. They point to the properties of sandstone, how it can fracture along straight lines, how ocean currents might have carved these shapes over millennia. It's a rational explanation that allows our comfortable timeline to remain intact. But stand before those perfectly carved steps, those deliberately shaped chambers, and the rational explanation begins to feel strained. The implications are staggering. If human hands shaped Yonaguni, then we must accept that sophisticated civilizations existed when we believed only primitive hunter-gatherers roamed the earth. But Yonaguni is not alone in challenging our assumptions. Off the coast of India, in the Gulf of Combat, sonar equipment has revealed something even more extraordinary. Buried beneath 35 meters of water lies the outline of what appears to be an entire city. Not a single monument, but a vast urban complex stretching for kilometers across the ocean floor. Grid-like patterns suggest organized streets. Geometric shapes indicate planned districts and substantial buildings. When artifacts were recovered from this underwater site, The results sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Carbon dating placed some materials at over 9,000 years old. This would make the submerged city older than any known civilization, predating the great cities of Mesopotamia by thousands of years. Think about what this means. While textbooks tell us humanity was just beginning to experiment with agriculture, this evidence suggests complex urban societies already existed. Cities with populations in the tens of thousands, sophisticated enough to plan their layouts, advanced enough to construct permanent settlements on a massive scale. Yet these discoveries remain largely ignored by mainstream academia. They don't fit the approved narrative of human development, so they're dismissed, explained away, or simply forgotten. But the evidence refuses to disappear beneath the waves. The Mediterranean Sea holds its own secrets. Near the Greek coast lies Pavlopetri, a Bronze Age city perfectly preserved beneath the shallow waters. Unlike the controversial sites we've discussed, Pavlopetri is accepted by conventional archaeology. Its streets, buildings, and tombs paint a clear picture of a sophisticated coastal civilization that was swallowed by rising seas. Pavlopetri proves beyond doubt that advanced cities have been lost to the oceans. If this happened in relatively recent history, what about the much older sites that rest in deeper waters? What about the coastlines that were submerged when the Ice Age ended and sea levels rose by over 100 meters? Consider the scope of what was lost. At the end of the last Ice Age, an area of land equivalent to the entire continent of North America disappeared beneath the waves. This wasn't barren wasteland, but the most fertile, desirable real estate of the ancient world. River deltas, coastal plains, sheltered bays perfect for harbors and cities. We are a coastal species. Today, the majority of our major cities sit by the sea. Why would our ancestors have been any different? Logic suggests they too would have built their greatest settlements along those ancient shores, which means their most impressive cities, their centers of learning and trade, their monuments to human achievement, all rest now in the deep darkness of the ocean floor. We search for the origins of civilization on the land that remained, the highlands that became our modern coastlines. But we're looking in the wrong place. We're like archaeologists trying to understand a library by examining only the books that happened to be stored on the highest shelf when the flood came. The ocean is more than just water covering our planet. It's a vast museum, a repository of lost worlds. Every dive into these depths brings the possibility of finding evidence that could rewrite human history. Yet we've explored less than 5% of our ocean floors. Entire civilizations could lie waiting in that unexplored 95%, their stories preserved in the cold, dark silence. But the ocean's testimony is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. If ancient civilizations did exist and were lost to rising waters, we might expect to find other types of evidence. Maps, perhaps, created by survivors who remembered what the world looked like before the flood. In 1929, historians working in a Turkish palace made a discovery that would puzzle scholars for decades. Among the dusty scrolls and texts, they found a map drawn on gazelle skin. It was signed by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis and dated to 1513. At first glance, it seemed like just another Renaissance-era chart showing the known coasts of Europe, Africa, and the Americas. But this map held a secret that wouldn't be fully understood for centuries. Along its southern edge, the map depicted a landmass that extended eastward from South America. For decades, scholars assumed this was simply a distorted representation of the Brazilian coast. Then, in the 1950s, a cartographer with expertise in ancient maps took a closer look. What he saw changed everything. This wasn't a distorted South America at all. It was an accurate depiction of the coast of Antarctica, specifically Queen Maud Land. The impossible part wasn't just that Antarctica wouldn't be officially discovered for another 300 years after Piri Reis drew his map. It was that the coastline was shown free of ice. According to modern geological science, Antarctica's coast has been buried under a kilometer of ice for at least 6,000 years, possibly much longer. Yet here was a map from 1513 showing the actual subglacial landmass, complete with bays, inlets, and river mouths that lie hidden beneath the frozen surface. Piri Reis himself provided a clue to this mystery. In notes written on the map's margins, he explained that he hadn't drawn this from his own explorations. Instead, he had compiled it from about 20 older source charts. Some had been captured from Spanish and Portuguese explorers. Others were far more ancient, sourced from the Imperial Library of Constantinople. Maps that he claimed dated back to the time of Alexander the Great, and some from sources that were older still. The admiral wasn't claiming to be a discoverer. He was a curator, assembling fragments of a lost atlas, and one of those fragments contained knowledge that shouldn't have existed, an ice-free Antarctica mapped with stunning accuracy. This wasn't an isolated case. In 1531, a French mathematician named Orance Fine produced a heart-shaped world map that also depicted Antarctica. Like Piri Reis, Fine showed the continent largely free of ice, with mountains, rivers, and clearly defined coastlines. What makes this even more remarkable is that Fine drew these features decades before Antarctica was proven to exist. For centuries, these maps were dismissed as fantasy or lucky speculation. Then, in 1958, scientists conducted the first comprehensive seismic survey of Antarctica. Using sound waves to penetrate the ice sheet, they mapped the actual land beneath. What they found matched, with unsettling accuracy, the geographical features that Fine had drawn 4 centuries earlier. The pattern continued with other cartographers of the era. Gerardus Mercator, the man who invented the map projection we still use today, included a detailed Antarctica on his 1569 world map. Felipe Buache, working in 1737, drew the continent not as a single landmass but as 2 large islands separated by a clear water channel. This was considered a bizarre error until the 1958 survey proved Buache correct. Under its unified ice sheet, Antarctica is indeed an archipelago dominated by 2 main land masses separated by a subglacial basin exactly where Buache had drawn his sea. Each of these cartographers claimed to be working from older sources. Ancient charts, they insisted, that contained this impossible knowledge. The implication is staggering. Somewhere in the distant past, someone had conducted a systematic survey of our planet, when its geography was radically different from today. They had mapped Antarctica when it was ice-free, creating charts so accurate they could guide Renaissance mapmakers to draw a continent they had never seen. This wasn't guesswork or lucky coincidence. Creating such precise maps would have required solving one of navigation's greatest challenges, determining longitude. This problem wasn't officially solved until the late 1700s with the invention of accurate marine chronometers. Yet these ancient source maps had to have been drawn with precise longitudinal measurements. You cannot map a continent that spans the entire globe at its base without knowing longitude. The civilization that created these original maps possessed a technology we believe was impossible for the ancient world. They had mastered not just astronomy and mathematics, but the precise timekeeping necessary for global navigation. They had undertaken what appears to be a comprehensive survey of the entire planet. These impossible maps represent more than just geographical knowledge. They're evidence of a lost science, a forgotten age when someone understood our world with a precision that rivals our own. The maps survived not as complete atlases, but as fragments, copied and recopied by scribes who may not have fully understood what they were preserving. We stand now at the threshold of a profound realization. The evidence from beneath the waves, the testimony of ancient maps, the whispers of impossible knowledge all point in the same direction. Our planet has hosted sophisticated civilizations before. The question that haunts us is not whether this happened, but how many times it has happened, and what became of these vanished worlds. The whispers of lost civilizations don't end with mysterious maps and sunken cities. They echo through the collective memory of humanity itself, preserved in stories so ancient and widespread that they transcend the boundaries of culture, geography, and time. These are not the tales of individual tribes or isolated peoples. They are the shared nightmares of our species, passed down through countless generations with a consistency that defies explanation. Walk into any library, open any collection of world mythology, and you'll find the same story told again and again. Different names, different details, but always the same terrifying core. A world-ending flood, waters rising to swallow everything. A chosen few who survived to rebuild from the ashes of what was lost. The Sumerians, creators of humanity's first known written language, preserved their version on clay tablets over 4,000 years ago. They told of Utnapishtim, warned by the god Ea that the other deities planned to cleanse the earth with water. The instructions were precise, technical. Build a vessel with specific dimensions, waterproof it with pitch, load it with the seed of all living things. When the deluge came, it was so violent that even the gods themselves cowered in fear. For 6 days and 7 nights, the storm raged until the world fell silent, transformed into a flat, empty expanse. Travel across continents and centuries, and the echoes multiply. In ancient India, the sage Manu receives warning from a fish that grows to enormous size, revealed to be an avatar of the great god Vishnu. The message is the same: build a great ship, preserve life, survive the coming catastrophe that will wash the world clean. In Greece, Deucalion is warned by his father Prometheus of Zeus's plan to destroy humanity with flood. The pattern holds: divine warning, technological salvation, careful preservation of the future. Cross the vast Atlantic to the Americas, where cultures that had no contact with the old world tell identical stories. The Aztecs speak of Nata and his wife Nena, warned by the gods to hollow out a cypress tree before the great deluge. The Mandan people of North Dakota preserve the memory of Numok Mukana, who built a great canoe to save his people from the waters that covered the earth. Even in the isolated Pacific, the pattern continues. Hawaiian legends tell of Nu-U, who escaped a great flood in a large vessel. The Aborigines of Australia, separated from other continents for tens of thousands of years, maintain stories of waters that rose to cover the land, forcing their ancestors to seek refuge on the highest peaks. Why this consistency? Why would completely isolated cultures, separated by oceans and millennia, all preserve the same specific narrative? The flood story contains details too precise, too technical to be mere archetype. The sending of birds to test for dry land appears in cultures that had no contact with each other. The preservation of animal life, the survival on mountaintops, the divine warning systems, all repeat with mechanical precision across the globe. Mainstream scholarship offers two explanations. Either the story spread from a single source, diffusing across the world over thousands of years, or different cultures independently invented similar tales to explain common natural disasters. But these explanations struggle under the weight of evidence. The sheer number of parallels, the technical specificity, the global distribution all suggest something more profound. Consider a third possibility. What if these aren't stories at all, but memories? Compressed, mythologized, but essentially accurate accounts of a real global catastrophe that traumatized our entire species. The consistency across cultures wouldn't be coincidence or diffusion, but shared experience, the collective testimony of survivors. Modern geology provides a framework for understanding how such a catastrophe could occur. At the end of the last ice age, our planet experienced what scientists call meltwater pulse events. These weren't gradual changes, but catastrophic releases of water as massive ice dams collapsed and glaciers disintegrated. Sea levels rose by dozens of meters over just a few centuries, an average of 1 meter every 20 years in some periods. For anyone living on the coastal plains where most human activity naturally concentrates, this would have been an incomprehensible disaster. Not a single wave, but a relentless generational crisis where the very boundaries of the world shifted year by year. Entire landscapes disappeared beneath the waves, forcing populations to retreat ever higher, carrying with them only what they could save. The flood myths may be humanity's earliest historical documents, preserving the memory of the most traumatic event our species has ever experienced. They're not religious allegories, but survival manuals, encoding the practical knowledge needed to endure a planetary catastrophe. The instructions for building vessels, preserving biodiversity, testing for safe conditions, all represent compressed wisdom for surviving the unthinkable. But these stories tell us something else, something that connects directly to our earlier evidence of lost civilizations. They consistently describe a world before the flood that was more advanced, more sophisticated than what came after. Golden ages brought to ruin by divine judgment. Advanced societies whose knowledge was lost beneath the waves. The Sumerian texts speak of antediluvian kings who reigned for thousands of years, of cities that existed before the waters came. Hindu traditions preserve memories of previous ages, cycles of civilization that rose to great heights before being swept away. The pattern suggests not just survival, but loss, the destruction of worlds more accomplished than our own. These myths may be our species' way of processing not just natural disaster, but the collapse of complexity itself. They preserve the memory of watching civilization dissolve, of seeing the accumulated wisdom of ages disappear beneath rising waters. The survivors who carried these stories forward weren't just preserving accounts of physical survival, but mourning the loss of everything their ancestors had built. The flood narratives also hint at something else, the presence of guides, teachers, figures who appeared after the catastrophe to help humanity rebuild. In Mesopotamian tradition, these were the Apkallu, wise beings who emerged from the waters to restore the arts of civilization. In India, they were the 7 sages who preserved sacred knowledge through the deluge. Across the Americas, similar figures appear, bringers of agriculture, astronomy, and law to peoples struggling to rebuild their shattered world. These teacher figures share remarkable consistency across cultures. They're often described as coming from the sea or sky, possessing knowledge far beyond what local populations could have developed independently. They bring not just practical skills, but complex sciences, sophisticated understanding of mathematics and astronomy, architectural techniques that allowed for monumental construction. What if these weren't mythological beings, but actual survivors of the lost civilizations? Refugees from drowned cities who carried with them fragments of advanced knowledge. In a world reduced to primitive conditions, anyone possessing even remnants of sophisticated science would seem godlike to struggling survivors. The teacher myths may preserve the memory of how civilization was reseeded after the Great Catastrophe, not through slow, independent development, but through the deliberate transmission of salvaged knowledge by those who remembered the world that was. This would explain the sudden appearance of complex societies in the archaeological record, the seemingly impossible leaps in human capability that mark the dawn of known history. The flood stories are more than ancient literature. They're testimonies, legal documents filed by our species to preserve the memory of our greatest trauma and our most remarkable survival. They tell us that we've faced planetary catastrophe before and endured. They remind us that civilization is fragile, that knowledge can be lost, but also that life finds a way to continue. But perhaps most importantly, they suggest that we're not starting from scratch. The wisdom preserved in these ancient accounts, the practical knowledge of survival and rebuilding, may be exactly what we need as we face our own planetary challenges. The teachers who appeared after the ancient flood may have left us more than just stories. They may have left us a blueprint for endurance, hidden in plain sight within the myths we've carried for thousands of years. These flood memories bridge the gap between the evidence beneath the waves and the monuments we're about to explore on land. They provide the narrative framework for understanding how knowledge could survive the destruction of entire civilizations, preserved not in libraries or archives, but in the most durable storage medium of all, human memory itself, encoded in stories too powerful to forget and too important to abandon. The greatest mystery isn't that these civilizations fell, it's that anything survived at all to tell us they once existed. The echoes of those ancient floods lead us to monuments that shouldn't exist. Scattered across our planet are structures so old, so impossibly precise, that they seem to mock our understanding of human development. These aren't the crude stone circles or simple earthworks we might expect from our supposed primitive ancestors. These are architectural marvels that would challenge modern engineers, built with technologies we can barely comprehend, aligned with astronomical precision that rivals our most sophisticated instruments. In the highlands of Turkey, beneath what was once thought to be just another hill, archaeologists uncovered something that shattered the timeline of civilization. Göbekli Tepe emerged from the earth like a message from another world. Massive T-shaped pillars, some weighing 50 tons, arranged in perfect circles. Intricate carvings of animals and symbols cover their surfaces with artistic skill that speaks of master craftsmen, not fumbling primitives learning to chip stone. The dating results were so shocking, they were initially dismissed. 12,000 years old. This places Göbekli Tepe 7,000 years before the Great Pyramid, 6,000 years before Stonehenge. It predates pottery, agriculture, even the domestication of animals. According to everything we thought we knew, the people of that era were supposed to be nomadic hunter-gatherers with no permanent settlements, no complex social structures, no ability to organize massive construction projects. Yet here stands proof of sophisticated planning, advanced engineering, and artistic vision that rivals anything produced by later civilizations. The builders understood leverage, transportation of massive stones, precise alignment, and symbolic representation. They created not just a single structure, but an entire complex of interlinked monuments that must have taken centuries to complete. The official explanation struggles to account for this impossibility. Archaeologists now suggest that Göbekli Tepe was built by scattered tribes who came together for religious purposes, and that the massive effort required to build it actually forced them to develop agriculture and settled life. Religion, they argue, came before farming, not after. It's an elegant theory that preserves our comfortable progression of human development, but it raises more questions than it answers. How did nomadic bands develop the organizational skills needed for such a project? Where did the unified artistic tradition come from? How did they acquire the astronomical knowledge evident in the site's alignments? And perhaps most mysteriously, why was the entire complex deliberately buried after 1,000 years of use, carefully covered with tons of earth, as if to preserve it for some future discovery? What if we have the story backwards? What if Göbekli Tepe wasn't the beginning of civilization, but one of its final monuments? What if the builders weren't primitive hunter-gatherers suddenly inspired to create, but survivors of the lost world, using their remaining knowledge to construct a message for the future? The deliberate burial begins to make sense if we see it as a time capsule, a desperate attempt to preserve something precious before the long darkness of forgetting descended. Across the ocean, in the thin air of the Bolivian highlands, another impossible sight awaits. Pumapunku sits at 14,000 feet above sea level, its massive stone blocks scattered like pieces of a cosmic jigsaw puzzle. But these aren't crude megalithic stones. They're precision-engineered components, cut from some of the hardest rock on Earth with an accuracy that modern machine shops would struggle to match. The H-blocks, named for their distinctive shape, are identical to within fractions of millimeters. Their surfaces are perfectly flat, their angles exactly 90 degrees. Complex interlocking joints connect the blocks without mortar, fitting together so precisely that you cannot slide a razor blade between them. Most puzzling of all are the small, evenly spaced holes drilled into channels within the stones, created with a precision that suggests high-speed rotary tools, not the primitive implements we associate with ancient builders. The conventional explanation attributes Pumapunku to the Tiwanaku civilization around 500 CE, built with stone hammers, bronze chisels, and unlimited patience. We're asked to believe that with these simple tools, ancient workers achieved tolerances that would challenge modern laser-cutting equipment. The mathematical precision, the identical mass-produced components, the complex three-dimensional puzzles of interlocking stone, all accomplished with prehistoric technology. But what if the Tiwanaku weren't the builders, but merely the inheritors? What if they discovered these ruins already ancient in their time, incorporating them into their own ceremonial center without truly understanding their original purpose? The extreme precision suggests not just advanced tools, but advanced planning, sophisticated engineering knowledge, and manufacturing capabilities that seem impossibly ahead of their supposed time. The site's destruction tells its own story. This wasn't gradual decay or careful dismantling. Massive blocks weighing hundreds of tons were tossed around like toys, scattered across the plain as if by some unimaginable force. Whatever destroyed Pumapunku did so with violence that speaks of catastrophe on a scale we can barely comprehend. Journey north to Peru, and the mystery deepens. Above the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, the fortress walls of Sacsayhuaman demonstrate another impossible achievement. The stones here are beyond massive, some weighing over 100 tons. They're not simple rectangular blocks, but complex polygonal shapes with 8, 10, 12 or more sides, each fitted to its neighbors with the same baffling precision we saw at Pumapunku. The logistics alone defy explanation. How were these enormous stones quarried from sites miles away, transported across rivers and up steep mountainsides, then shaped into complex interlocking forms. Even with modern equipment, moving a 100-ton object through such terrain would be a monumental undertaking. With the technology supposedly available to ancient builders, it should have been impossible. When Spanish conquistadors first encountered these walls, they attributed them to demons, unable to believe human hands could have accomplished such feats. The Inca themselves, when questioned, gave an intriguingly honest answer. They claimed they didn't build the massive megalithic sections of Sacsayhuaman. Instead, they said it had been constructed by a race of giants in a time long before their empire existed. This pattern repeats across the globe. In Lebanon, the massive stones of Baalbek include blocks weighing over 800 tons, moved and positioned with precision that baffles modern engineers. In Egypt, the precision of the Great Pyramid's construction exceeds true north with an error of just what we can achieve today, aligned to 3 arc minutes. In England, stone circles were erected using techniques we celestial movements with astronomical accuracy. Each can only guess at, positioned to tract. Stonehenge's massive trill site tells the same story. Impossible precision, inexplicable logistics, astronomical alignments that demonstrate sophisticated knowledge of celestial mechanics. These aren't the crude first attempts of primitive builders learning their craft. They're the products of mature, advanced engineering traditions, working at the peak of their capabilities. The builders of these monuments understood mathematics, astronomy, and physics in ways that allowed them to work with massive stones as if they were made of clay. They possessed organizational skills that could coordinate massive workforces, transportation methods that could move multi-ton blocks across impossible terrain, and construction techniques that created structures more durable than anything we build today. These monuments share another curious feature. Many show signs of being built in multiple phases, with later, cruder additions built on top of earlier, more sophisticated foundations. It's as if each represents not a single building campaign, but multiple civilizations building upon the ruins of their predecessors. The earliest phases invariably show the highest levels of skill and precision, while later additions become progressively more primitive. This suggests a pattern of decline, not progress. The first builders possessed superior knowledge and techniques that were gradually lost over time. Each subsequent culture that inhabited these sites could add to them, but never match the skill of the original architects. We're not looking at the birth of monumental architecture, but its twilight, the final flowering of traditions that were already ancient. The astronomical alignments embedded in these structures reveal another layer of mystery. They're not just positioned randomly, but oriented toward specific stars, constellations, and celestial events. The builders understood precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that changes the apparent positions of stars over thousands of years. They encoded into stone knowledge of celestial cycles that span millennia, as if they were creating permanent records for observers in the distant future. These alignments serve as timestamps, allowing us to determine when the monuments were originally oriented toward their target stars. In many cases, the dates push back far earlier than conventional archaeology allows. The Sphinx's gaze was aligned with the constellation Leo when Leo rose due east at the spring equinox 11,000 years ago. The shafts in the Great Pyramid point to stars as they appeared in the sky thousands of years before the monument's supposed construction date. The builders weren't just creating impressive architecture, they were encoding astronomical data into permanent structures, creating stone computers that could track celestial movements across vast spans of time. This suggests a level of scientific sophistication that we're only beginning to appreciate. An understanding of cosmic cycles that rivals our modern knowledge. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of these monuments is what happened to the knowledge that created them. The techniques used to build Göbekli Tepe, Puma Punku, and Sacsayhuaman were never replicated. They appear suddenly in the archaeological record, achieve impossible perfection, then vanish without a trace. There's no evolutionary development, no gradual improvement leading to these achievements. They stand alone, technological orphans with no clear ancestry or descendants. This pattern suggests these monuments weren't products of slowly developing human societies, but remnants of a mature, sophisticated civilization that had already reached its peak. The knowledge they represent wasn't gained through gradual experimentation, but inherited from an even earlier tradition. When that knowledge was finally lost, later cultures could only wonder at the achievements of their predecessors, building crude imitations on the foundations of giants. These stone libraries speak in a language we're still learning to read. They're not just impressive architecture, but encoded messages from a lost world. They tell us that the path of human development hasn't been the steady upward climb we imagine, but a series of peaks and valleys, rises and catastrophic falls. We're not the first to reach for the stars, but perhaps the latest in a long line of civilizations that have touched greatness and lost it again. The monuments stand as eternal questions carved in stone. Who built them? How did they achieve such precision? What became of the knowledge that made them possible? And perhaps most importantly, what were they trying to tell us by encoding their wisdom in the most permanent medium available, the bedrock of the earth itself? These questions lead us deeper into the mystery of our forgotten past, toward evidence that the lost civilizations possessed not just architectural knowledge, but technologies that we're only now beginning to understand. The stone libraries are impressive, but they may represent only a fraction of what was lost when the ancient world fell silent. The stone monuments may impress us with their scale and precision, but they represent only the most durable remnants of lost knowledge. Like massive icebergs, what we see above the surface hints at something far greater hidden beneath. The truly revolutionary evidence lies not in grand pyramids or megalithic walls, but in small, seemingly insignificant objects that have survived against all odds. These artifacts whisper of technologies that shouldn't have existed, of scientific understanding that predates our accepted timeline by millennia. Picture yourself in the warm waters of the Aegean Sea, diving toward a Roman shipwreck that has rested on the seafloor for over 2,000 years. Among the expected treasures, bronze statues and pottery, lies a corroded lump of metal that would change our understanding of ancient capabilities forever. For decades, this unassuming chunk of bronze and wood sat forgotten in museum storage, dismissed as debris from an ancient disaster. Then, modern technology allowed researchers to peer inside without destroying the delicate artifact. What they discovered defied everything we thought we knew about ancient Greek engineering. Hidden within the corrosion was an intricate mechanical device of breathtaking complexity. Dozens of precisely cut bronze gears meshed together in differential arrangements that weren't supposed to be invented for another 1,500 years. This was the Antikythera mechanism, and it represented a level of technological sophistication that had no business existing in the ancient world. This wasn't just any machine. It was a portable astronomical computer that could predict the positions of celestial bodies decades into the future. By turning a simple hand crank, an ancient user could track the movements of the sun and moon, predict eclipses with stunning accuracy, and even follow the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. The device incorporated mathematical models of celestial motion so precise that modern astronomers are still impressed by its accuracy. The mechanism's existence poses uncomfortable questions for our linear view of technological progress. Where are the simpler prototypes that should have led to such sophistication? Where are the workshops that produced such precise gears? How did the Greeks acquire knowledge of differential mechanics that we supposedly didn't rediscover until the Renaissance? The device appears in history like a Boeing 747 discovered in a world of horse-drawn carts. Traditional explanations suggest this represents the pinnacle of Hellenistic engineering, a one-off masterpiece that was lost during the fall of the Roman Empire. But what if we're looking at this backwards? What if the Antikythera mechanism wasn't the first of its kind, but among the last? What if it represents the final flowering of a much older technological tradition, the last remnant of knowledge that was already ancient when Greek craftsmen built it? This possibility becomes more intriguing when we consider other anomalous artifacts scattered across time and geography. In the deserts of Iraq, archaeologists uncovered a simple clay pot that challenges our understanding of ancient science. The vessel itself appears unremarkable, a humble storage jar from the Parthian period around 2,000 years ago. But examine it closely, and impossible details emerge. Inside the pot, carefully insulated from each other, are a copper cylinder and an iron rod. Fill the vessel with an acidic solution, any fruit juice available to ancient peoples, and it produces a steady electrical current. This Baghdad battery, as it's known, demonstrates that the principles of electrochemistry were understood and applied thousands of years before Alessandro Volta supposedly invented the first battery in 1800. Mainstream archaeology struggles with this discovery. They insist the electrical properties must be coincidental, that the pot was designed for storing scrolls or some other mundane purpose. But every component is positioned exactly where it needs to be to function as a battery. The combination of metals, the careful insulation, the chemical requirements, all align perfectly for electrical generation. If this is coincidence, it's the most remarkable accident in archaeological history. What practical use could ancient peoples have had for electrical current? The answer may lie in one of their most sophisticated crafts. Archaeological evidence shows that ancient metalworkers achieved levels of precision in gilding that are difficult to explain with conventional techniques. The most efficient method for applying thin, even layers of gold to base metals is electroplating, a process that requires exactly the kind of steady, low-voltage current the Baghdad battery could provide. If ancient craftsmen understood electrochemistry well enough to build functional batteries, what other scientific principles might they have mastered? The implications ripple outward, suggesting that our ancestors possessed practical knowledge of forces we consider modern discoveries. Deep beneath an Egyptian temple, carved into walls that haven't seen daylight for millennia, another piece of the puzzle awaits. The reliefs at Dendera depict scenes that make modern observers do double takes. Large, bulb-shaped objects connected by thick cables to rectangular boxes. Inside the transparent bulbs, serpentine forms stretch from stem to tip, while human figures carefully tend to the apparatus. To modern eyes trained in electrical systems, the resemblance is uncanny. These look remarkably like primitive light bulbs, complete with power sources and electrical connections. The serpents inside could represent glowing filaments, the lotus flower stems could be sockets, and the rectangular boxes could be batteries or generators. Egyptologists offer symbolic interpretations. These are creation myths, they explain, showing the cosmic serpent emerging from the primordial lotus. But the images contain strangely technical details for religious art. Why the emphasis on cables and connections? Why do attendant figures appear to be operating switches or controls? And perhaps most tellingly, Why are the ceilings of these deep chambers completely free of soot? Every ancient tomb and temple we've excavated shows evidence of the smoke and carbon residue you'd expect from torches or oil lamps. Except these chambers. Their pristine condition suggests some other form of illumination was used, something that burned clean or didn't burn at all. Could the Dendera reliefs be schematic diagrams rather than mythological scenes? Could they preserve the memory of electrical lighting systems that once illuminated the sacred spaces of ancient Egypt? These artifacts, the Antikythera mechanism, the Baghdad battery, the Dendera lights, share a common thread. They represent isolated examples of sophisticated technology appearing in cultures we consider primitive. Each could be dismissed individually as an anomaly, a misinterpretation, or a one-off invention. But taken together, they suggest something far more significant. We may be looking at fragments of a lost technological tradition, not the crude beginnings of scientific understanding, but the scattered remnants of knowledge that was once far more complete. Like finding individual gears, wires, and circuits from a dismantled computer, these artifacts hint at a larger system of understanding that has been broken apart and scattered across time. The pattern becomes clearer when we consider how knowledge survives catastrophic loss. When civilizations collapse, it's not the grand monuments that preserve practical information. Those can be destroyed, buried, or forgotten. Instead, knowledge persists in its most basic, portable forms. Simple devices that can be reproduced by craftsmen who may not fully understand the principles behind them. Techniques that can be passed down through apprenticeships even when the theoretical framework is lost. A master craftsman might know how to build a battery without understanding atomic theory. An astronomer might construct a mechanical computer without grasping the mathematical concepts it embodies. Knowledge becomes craft tradition, preserved through repetition rather than comprehension. Over generations, the understanding fades while the techniques persist, creating technological orphans that seem why these artifacts appear without evolutionary predecessors. They're impossibly advanced for their time. This explains not innovations, but inheritances. The Baghdad battery isn't the invention of electrochemistry, but its last surviving application. The Antikythera mechanism isn't the birth of precision engineering, but its final expression before the knowledge was lost. If this interpretation is correct, then these mysterious devices are more than just archaeological curiosities. They're forensic evidence of a vanished world. Each artifact represents a different branch of science that flourished in the lost civilization. Together, they paint a picture of a society that had mastered practical applications of physics, chemistry, astronomy, and engineering on a scale we're only now beginning to appreciate. But these technological fragments raise an even more disturbing question. If such sophisticated knowledge existed in the past, what happened to it? How does an entire scientific tradition simply vanish, leaving behind only scattered remnants? The answer may lie not in gradual decline or peaceful forgetting, but in something far more violent and sudden. Ancient texts from around the world preserve memories of conflict so devastating they reshaped the very landscape. Wars fought with weapons that could level cities, poisons that lingered in the earth for generations, and destruction so complete that survivors were left to rebuild civilization from its foundations. These accounts have long been dismissed as mythology, poetic exaggeration of conventional battles fought with swords and arrows. But what if the poets were being literal? What if they were describing technologies we recognize all too well? The Sanskrit epics of ancient India contain passages that read like technical manuals for weapons of mass destruction. They describe projectiles that could devastate entire armies, leaving the survivors with symptoms that sound remarkably like radiation poisoning. Hair and nails falling out, food becoming contaminated, the need to wash repeatedly in running water to cleanse oneself of invisible poison. Modern readers familiar with the effects of nuclear weapons find these descriptions chillingly familiar. The bright flash, the mushroom-shaped cloud, the lingering contamination that makes land uninhabitable for years. Are we reading poetry, or are we reading history? Could the lost civilizations have possessed not just sophisticated engineering, but weapons technology that rivaled our own? Archaeological evidence hints at the possibility. In the ruins of ancient cities, researchers have found areas where stone and clay have been fused into glass-like substances. This vitrification requires temperatures exceeding 1,500 degrees Celsius, far hotter than any conventional fire could achieve. While mainstream explanations invoke natural phenomena like lightning strikes or meteorite impacts, the pattern and distribution of these glassy areas suggests something more deliberate. The most unsettling evidence comes from sites where human remains show elevated levels of radioactivity, concentrations of isotopes that shouldn't exist in ancient bones. While geological explanations are offered, the coincidence of radioactive skeletons, vitrified ruins, and ancient texts describing nuclear warfare becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss. If advanced civilizations did possess such weapons, it would explain both their technological sophistication and their ultimate disappearance. A society capable of splitting atoms would also be capable of destroying itself completely. The scattered technological fragments we find today might be all that survived of cultures that pushed too far, too fast, and paid the ultimate price for their hubris. This interpretation transforms our understanding of the cycle of civilization. We may not be the first to harness the fundamental forces of nature, but simply the latest to rediscover them. The knowledge that seems so modern, so uniquely ours, might be following a path walked before. The same scientific principles that allow us to split atoms and manipulate matter at the molecular level could have been understood by minds that lived and died thousands of years before our recorded history began. The implications are both humbling and terrifying. If we're not the first to achieve such power, then we're also not the first to face the choice of how to use it. The ancient texts that describe world-ending wars might not be fantasies, but warnings, testimonies from survivors of a previous cycle, desperate to ensure their mistakes wouldn't be repeated. But perhaps the most profound realization is that knowledge, once discovered, has a way of surfacing again and again. The principles of physics don't change. The mathematical relationships that govern matter and energy remain constant across eons. If one civilization can unlock these secrets, others will eventually follow the same path. The question isn't whether we'll rediscover what was lost, but whether we'll have the wisdom to handle it better than those who came before. These technological fragments, scattered across time like breadcrumbs from a vanished feast, may be more than just evidence of lost civilizations. They may be messages, encoded warnings about the dangers of knowledge without wisdom. They remind us that progress isn't always permanent, that even the greatest achievements can be undone in moments of catastrophic folly. As we stand at our own technological precipice, holding powers that could remake or destroy our world, these ancient artifacts take on new significance. They're not just curiosities from a distant past, but mirrors reflecting our own future possibilities. The choice of which path to take, which legacy to leave for future archaeologists to puzzle over, remains ours to make. The whispers from the ruins grow louder with each discovery, each anomalous artifact that refuses to fit our comfortable timeline. They're telling us we're not alone in time, not the first to reach for the stars or split the atom, but they're also telling us something else, something that should give us hope. Knowledge may be lost, civilizations may fall, but life endures. Somewhere, somehow, the flame of consciousness persists through even the darkest ages, carrying forward the essential spark that makes us human. Whether we choose to listen to these whispers, to learn from the mistakes preserved in stone and story, will determine whether our own civilization joins the ranks of the lost or finally breaks the cycle to become something genuinely new under the sun. The most haunting possibility isn't that these ancient civilizations simply vanished into the mists of time. It's that they may have left behind guardians, keepers of their deepest secrets who have watched over humanity's redevelopment from the shadows for millennia. If knowledge as sophisticated as we've discovered could survive in fragments, imagine what might be preserved intact, hidden away in sanctuaries we haven't found, protected by bloodlines that stretch back to the world before the flood. Consider the mystery of how complex knowledge appears suddenly in human history without apparent precedent. Agriculture doesn't slowly evolve. It erupts simultaneously across multiple continents with sophisticated techniques already in place. Writing systems don't develop gradually. They appear fully formed with complex grammar and symbolic structures. Astronomical knowledge doesn't accumulate slowly through observation. It manifests with mathematical precision that takes modern computers to verify. The conventional explanation attributes these leaps to human genius, sudden inspirations that ancient traditions have whispered about for thousands of years, transformed primitive societies overnight. But there's another possibility that, what if these advances weren't discoveries at all, but teachings? What if scattered groups of survivors from the lost world deliberately seeded this knowledge back into developing cultures when they judged humanity ready to receive it? In the aftermath of a global catastrophe that destroyed most of civilization, the few who possessed advanced knowledge would face a terrible choice. They could attempt to rebuild immediately, trying to restore the complex society that had just been destroyed. But in a world reduced to survival mode, such attempts would likely fail. The infrastructure, the educational systems, the social structures needed to support advanced science simply wouldn't exist. The alternative would be more subtle, more patient. Wait for new societies to develop naturally, then carefully introduce fragments of the old knowledge when they were stable enough to preserve and expand upon it. This would require incredible discipline, planning that spanned centuries, and an organization capable of maintaining its mission across dozens of generations. Such a group would need to remain hidden, operating through intermediaries and carefully chosen initiates. They would need to disguise their true purpose, perhaps presenting themselves as priests, philosophers, or teachers of esoteric wisdom. Most importantly, they would need to encode their knowledge in forms that could survive political upheavals, religious persecutions, and the natural tendency of information to become corrupted over time. The fingerprints of such an organization would be subtle but detectable. We might expect to find similar symbols appearing across different cultures and time periods. Mathematical constants encoded in architecture separated by continents, astronomical alignments that demonstrate knowledge beyond what local populations should have possessed. We might find mystery schools and secret societies that claim lineages stretching back to antediluvian times, preserving rituals and teachings whose origins they themselves no longer fully understand. Look at the Great Pyramids of Egypt, and you find mathematical relationships encoded in stone that wouldn't be formally discovered by our civilization for thousands of years. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height equals pi with remarkable precision. The internal chambers align with stellar positions that required sophisticated astronomical calculations. The construction demonstrates engineering principles that modern architects struggle to replicate. The conventional explanation credits this to the sudden flowering of Egyptian genius, a civilization that somehow leaped from mud brick construction to perfect pyramid building in just a few generations. But Egyptian texts themselves suggest a different story. They speak of the Neteru, divine beings who ruled before the pharaohs, who possessed knowledge of the heavens and the arts of building. Later pharaohs claimed to be restoring monuments that were already ancient in their time, following plans preserved from the first time when gods walked among men. What if the Egyptian priesthood wasn't inventing this astronomical and mathematical knowledge, but preserving it? What if the pyramid builders were following blueprints handed down from the survivors of an earlier age? The precision, the sudden appearance of advanced techniques, the claims of divine instruction all make more sense if we see the pyramids not as the birth of monumental architecture, but as its restoration. This pattern repeats across the ancient world. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians emerged with complex writing, advanced mathematics, and sophisticated understanding of astronomy that they attributed to the Anunnaki, beings who came from the heavens to teach humanity the arts of civilization. In the Americas, cultures from Mexico to Peru told of bearded teachers who arrived from across the sea, bringing knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, and monumental construction before departing with promises to return. These teacher figures share remarkable consistency across cultures that had no contact with each other. They're described as tall, fair-skinned, often bearded in populations where such features were rare. They possess knowledge far beyond what local development could have produced. They establish schools, initiate selected individuals into their mysteries, then disappear, leaving behind transformed societies and tantalizing hints about their true origins. Mainstream anthropology explains these similarities as archetypal projections, universal patterns that emerge from the human psyche when cultures try to explain rapid social development. But the details are often too specific, too technical to be mere psychological symbols. The teachers don't just bring abstract wisdom, they bring practical sciences, specific mathematical relationships, detailed astronomical observations that can be verified with modern instruments. If such a hidden tradition did exist, it would need to adapt as civilizations rose and fell. In the ancient world, it might have operated through temple priesthoods and mystery schools. During the medieval period, it could have influenced monastic orders and alchemical societies. In our modern era, it might work through scientific institutions, think tanks, or organizations so integrated into the fabric of society that their true purpose remains invisible. The Vatican's secret archives, containing documents spanning over a millennium of human history, represent exactly the kind of repository where such knowledge might be preserved. With 85 kilometers of shelving holding materials that span centuries, it would be the perfect place to store information deemed too sensitive or revolutionary for public consumption. The Catholic Church's role in preserving classical texts during the Dark Ages establishes precedent for such custodianship of knowledge. But the preservation wouldn't be limited to documents. Knowledge would also survive in bloodlines, passed down through families that maintained their connection to the ancient wisdom across generations. These genetic carriers wouldn't necessarily understand the full scope of what they preserved, but they would serve as living repositories of information, activated when the time was right. This explains the persistent legends about royal bloodlines possessing divine mandates to rule. if certain families actually did carry genetic or cultural inheritance from advanced ancient civilizations, their claim to special authority would have basis in fact rather than mere mythology. The emphasis on bloodline purity in many ancient cultures takes on new meaning if we see it not as arbitrary prejudice, but as an attempt to preserve specific genetic or informational lineages. Modern genetics has revealed anomalies that support this possibility. The distribution of certain blood types, particularly the Rh-negative factor, doesn't follow the patterns we'd expect from normal human evolution. These rare blood types appear in isolated pockets around the world, often associated with populations that preserve unusual cultural traditions or claim descent from ancient peoples. While mainstream science offers explanations based on genetic drift and founder effects, the pattern could also reflect the persistence of bloodlines that were once more widespread. The keeper tradition would also explain why certain knowledge appears and disappears from history in cycles. Technologies like concrete that could set underwater, demonstrated by Roman engineers, was lost for over 1,000 years before being rediscovered. Greek fire, the incendiary weapon that protected Constantinople, vanished so completely that modern chemists can only guess at its composition. Damascus steel, renowned for its superior quality, became a lost art whose secrets died with its final masters. These weren't just cases of knowledge being forgotten through neglect. The loss was often sudden and complete, as if the information was being actively suppressed or withdrawn. What if the keepers periodically made decisions about what knowledge humanity was ready to handle? Technologies that could be misused might be allowed to fade from common knowledge, preserved only in hidden archives until future generations proved more trustworthy. This selective revelation would explain the curious timing of many scientific breakthroughs. Why did multiple inventors simultaneously develop similar technologies during the Industrial Revolution? Why did the Renaissance see such an explosion of artistic and scientific achievement? The conventional explanation credits improved communication and accumulated knowledge reaching critical mass. But what if these periods of rapid advancement coincided with decisions by hidden guardians to release previously restricted information? The keepers wouldn't need to directly teach new discoveries. They could simply ensure that the right information reached the right minds at the right time. A manuscript left where a curious scholar would find it, a conversation overheard by an inventor, a dream that provided inspiration for an artist. The guidance would be so subtle that recipients would believe themselves to be making independent discoveries. This interpretation transforms our understanding of human progress from a story of gradual advancement to one of carefully managed development. We wouldn't be climbing steadily toward greater knowledge, but being led along a path determined by intelligences that understand both our capabilities and our limitations. The pace of revelation would be calibrated to what are social. But this raises profound questions about human and ethical development could handle: agency and free will. If our greatest achievements are actually rediscoveries of ancient knowledge, carefully doled out by hidden teachers, then what claim do we have to our own accomplishments? Are we truly the masters of our destiny, or are we students following a curriculum designed by teachers we've never met? The answer may depend on what we do with the knowledge we've been given. The keepers, if they exist, would be judging not just our technical competence, but our wisdom. How we choose to use the powers we've unlocked, whether we repeat the mistakes that destroyed previous civilizations or find a way to transcend them, would determine whether we graduate to the next level of understanding or face another reset. The evidence for this hidden guidance grows stronger as we examine the most sensitive areas of modern knowledge. Nuclear physics, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence. Each represents a threshold technology that could either elevate humanity or destroy it. The fact that we've developed these capabilities in the span of just a few generations, after thousands of years of slower progress, suggests we may have reached another decision point in our supervised development. The Keepers, if they're still watching, would be faced with the same choice their predecessors made in ancient times. Allow us to continue developing these dangerous technologies and risk another catastrophic collapse, or intervene to guide us towards safer applications. The signs of such intervention might be subtle, appearing as fortunate accidents, timely discoveries, or inspired insights that steer us away from the most destructive possibilities. But perhaps the most significant evidence for the Keeper tradition lies not in what knowledge has been revealed, but in what remains hidden. Despite our advanced science, we still can't explain how the pyramids were built with such precision, how massive stones were moved at sites like Sacsayhuaman, or how ancient astronomers achieved such accurate measurements without modern instruments. The most impressive achievements of the past remain beyond our current capabilities. This suggests that the deepest secrets, the most powerful technologies, are still being withheld. The Keepers may have judged that we're not yet ready for the knowledge that built the megalithic monuments, that created the impossible maps, that allowed ancient civilizations to reshape matter itself. These ultimate secrets wait in hidden vaults, protected by guardians who remember what happens when such power that haunts us is whether we'll prove is unleashed prematurely. The question destined to repeat the cycle of rise and fall that Epers, patient as stone, continue worthy of these final revelations, or whether Weir has claimed every previous civilization. The Kither watch from the shadows, ready to guide us toward transcendence or witness our return. The choice, as always, remains ours to the silence from which we came. Make. The whispers of hidden knowledge and ancient guardians lead us toward perhaps the most unsettling revelation of all. What if the very cosmos itself bears witness to civilizations that rose and fell long before our time? What if the silence we perceive when we look up at the star-filled night isn't emptiness, but evidence of a pattern that repeats across the galaxy, a cycle of achievement and destruction that may be as universal as gravity itself? When we peer into the depths of space with our most powerful telescopes, we encounter a paradox that has puzzled scientists for decades. Our galaxy contains hundreds of billions of stars, many orbiting planets that could support life. The universe has existed for over 13 billion years, providing ample time for intelligence to emerge and flourish on countless worlds. Yet despite this vast stage and endless time, we detect no signals, no evidence of advanced civilizations, no signs that anyone else has ever learned to harness the forces of nature as we have. This cosmic silence is known as the Fermi paradox, named after the physicist who first articulated the troubling question, where is everybody? If life is common, if intelligence naturally emerges from biological evolution, then the galaxy should be bustling with activity. We should detect radio signals, observe massive engineering projects, find evidence of spacefaring civilizations that have had millions of years to spread across the stars. Instead, we find only silence, a darkness so complete it suggests something fundamental prevents civilizations from reaching the point where they become detectable across interstellar distances. Scientists call this hypothetical barrier the Great Filter, an evolutionary bottleneck so severe that it eliminates virtually every species that encounters it. The terrifying question is where this filter lies in the development of intelligent life. Is it behind us, making us among the first to successfully navigate the treacherous path from simple organisms to spacefaring civilization? Or does it lie ahead, waiting to claim us as it has claimed all the others who reached our level of technological development. The evidence from our own planet suggests the filter may not be a single event, but a recurring pattern. The geological record reveals multiple mass extinction events, catastrophes so severe they reset the evolutionary clock and forced life to begin anew from whatever survived the devastation. But these natural disasters pale in comparison to what intelligent species might inflict upon themselves. Consider the weapons we've developed in just the past century. Nuclear arsenals capable of rendering our planet uninhabitable, biological agents that could wipe out entire ecosystems, chemical pollutants that alter the very chemistry of our atmosphere and oceans. We've gained the power to end our own story, and we're not even a century into the atomic age. If this pattern holds across the galaxy, then every civilization that reaches our level of technological sophistication faces the same test. They unlock the fundamental forces of physics, gain the ability to manipulate matter and energy on massive scales, and then face a choice that will determine their ultimate fate. Use this power wisely, and they might transcend their planetary origins to become a spacefaring species. Use it foolishly, and they join the cosmic silence, the ruins beneath our oceans, the impossible precision of ancient monuments, the technological artifacts that shouldn't exist, all point towards civilizations on our own world that may have faced this test before us. The vitrified stones found at ancient sites, the radioactive anomalies in archaeological deposits, the descriptions of weapons that sound remarkably like nuclear warfare, all suggest that previous inhabitants of Earth may have unlocked similar powers and paid the ultimate price for their misuse. This interpretation transforms our understanding of the reset cycle from a series of natural catastrophes to a recurring pattern of civilizational suicide. Each time intelligence emerges and develops sophisticated technology, it reaches the same critical juncture we now face. The filter isn't an external threat, but an internal one. The greatest danger to any advanced civilization is itself. The cosmic silence begins to make sense when viewed through this lens. We don't detect other civilizations not because they never existed, but because they destroyed themselves before becoming detectable across interstellar distances. The galaxy may be littered with the remains of worlds that pushed too far, too fast, leaving behind only radioactive craters and the fading echoes of their final transmissions. On Earth, this pattern may have repeated multiple times. The flood myths preserved in human memory could record not just natural disasters, but the aftermath of civilizational collapse. The survivors who rebuilt would carry fragmented memories of the world that was, stories of golden ages brought to ruin by hubris and violence. Over time, these memories would transform into myths of gods and giants, divine punishment and cleansing floods. But our planet's geological record offers a unique opportunity to test this hypothesis. Unlike other worlds separated from us by vast interstellar distances, Earth preserves evidence of its past in layers of rock and sediment. If previous civilizations did achieve industrial-level technology before destroying themselves, they should have left detectable traces in the geological record. Modern climate science has taught us what signatures to look for. Industrial civilizations inevitably alter their planet's atmosphere by burning fossil fuels, releasing massive quantities of carbon dioxide that can be detected in ice cores and marine sediments for millions of years. They produce artificial materials like plastics and synthetic chemicals that would preserve as a distinct layer in the rock record. They manipulate nitrogen cycles through agriculture on a scale that leaves isotopic fingerprints. Most dramatically, they often trigger mass extinction events as their activities disrupt natural ecosystems. When geologists examine Earth's deep past, they do find events that match this profile. Periods of rapid warming accompanied by carbon spikes, unusual chemical signatures, and mass extinctions. Conventionally, these are attributed to volcanic activity or asteroid impacts, but the pattern could also reflect the rise and fall of previous industrial civilizations, their chemical fingerprints misinterpreted as natural phenomena because we weren't looking for evidence of ancient technology. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, which occurred 56 million years ago, shows all the hallmarks of industrial activity: rapid global warming, massive carbon release, ocean acidification, and widespread extinction in marine ecosystems. While the conventional explanation invokes prolonged volcanic eruptions, the event's characteristics are remarkably similar to what our own civilization is currently producing through fossil fuel combustion. If this interpretation is correct, then we may have been staring at evidence of lost civilizations for decades without recognizing it. The geological signatures we attribute to natural catastrophes could actually be tombstones, marking the graves of species that reached our level of development and failed the ultimate test. This possibility adds urgency to our current situation. We're not just facing environmental challenges or the risk of nuclear warfare. We're approaching the same filter that may have claimed every other technological civilization in our galaxy's history. The choices we make in the coming decades won't just determine our own fate, but whether we break the cycle of silence or add our voices to the cosmic graveyard. The ancient monuments scattered across our planet take on new significance when viewed through this lens. They may not just be remnants of lost civilizations, but warnings, messages encoded in the most durable materials available, designed to survive multiple reset cycles and remind future intelligence of the dangers that lie ahead. The astronomical alignments built into these structures serve as timestamps, marking when they were constructed and providing future archaeologists with precise dating information. But they may also serve as calendars, tracking cosmic cycles that determine when the next test will come. The builders may have understood that the filter operates on predictable timescales, that civilizations inevitably reach critical technological thresholds at specific points in their development. If this is true, then the ancient knowledge preserved in myths and monuments isn't just historical curiosity. It's a survival manual, instructions left by previous species who navigated the filter successfully, or warnings from those who failed. The flood stories found in every culture could be more than memories of natural disasters. They could be accounts of reset events, civilizational collapses that cleared the stage for new attempts at transcending planetary limitations. The teacher figures described in ancient traditions, the mysterious beings who appeared after catastrophes to guide rebuilding efforts, take on new meaning in this context. They may not have been survivors of the lost civilization at all, but representatives of an older intelligence that has been watching Earth cycles for millions of years. Observers from beyond our world who occasionally intervene to ensure that the spark of consciousness survives each reset, that the experiment continues despite repeated failures. This interpretation explains why these teachers consistently provided the same types of knowledge: agriculture to ensure survival, astronomy to track cosmic cycles, mathematics to understand universal principles, and architecture to create lasting monuments that could preserve information across time. They weren't trying to rapidly rebuild the lost civilization, but to plant seeds that would grow into something potentially wiser and more stable. The consistency of these accounts across cultures separated by oceans and millennia suggests a coordinated effort spanning geological time. If external observers have been managing Earth's recovery from multiple reset events, they would need to maintain their mission across periods far longer than any terrestrial civilization has existed. This implies a level of stability and longevity that transcends anything we can currently imagine. But perhaps the most profound implication of this cosmic perspective is that we may not be alone in facing the Great Filter. If the pattern of rise and collapse is universal, then somewhere among the stars, other young civilizations are approaching their own moments of testing. The silence we detect may not be permanent, but temporary. The quiet between acts in a vast drama that plays out across the galaxy. Our success or failure in transcending our limitations could influence more than just our own fate. If we can break the cycle, if we can develop the wisdom to match our power, we might become the teachers for the next species to reach this threshold. We could join the ranks of those who watch and guide, helping to ensure that consciousness continues to emerge and evolve despite the recurring catastrophes. The alternative is to add our story to the geological record, another carbon spike and extinction event that future archaeologists will puzzle over. Another civilization that gained the power of gods but lacked the wisdom to wield it responsibly. Another voice silenced before it could contribute to the cosmic conversation we still hope to join. The choice remains ours, but the stakes extend far beyond our own world. In learning to transcend our limitations, we might not just save ourselves, but begin to heal the great silence that hangs over the galaxy like a shroud. The ancient monuments and myths may be trying to tell us that we're part of something much larger than we imagined, participants in an experiment that spans worlds and eons. Whether we prove worthy of that cosmic trust, whether we finally break free from the cycle of rise and fall that has claimed all who came before, depends entirely on the wisdom we can summon in the face of powers that could either elevate us to the stars or reduce us to radioactive dust. The universe watches and waits, as it has watched countless times before, to see if this latest attempt at transcendence will succeed where all others have failed. The silence that surrounds us isn't empty. It's full of potential, waiting for voices wise enough to break it without destroying themselves in the process. The weight of this cosmic perspective settles over us like the darkness between stars, heavy with implications that stretch far beyond our small blue world. Yet as we stand at this precipice, facing the same tests that may have claimed countless civilizations before us, we must ask the most fundamental question of all. Are we truly powerless in the face of this cycle? Or do we possess something that our predecessors lacked? The answer may lie not in our technology, which mirrors what previous civilizations achieved, nor in our science, which follows the same universal principles they discovered. It lies in our awareness. For perhaps the first time in Earth's long history, a technological species has become conscious of the pattern itself. We are the first to read the warnings written in stone, to decode the messages preserved in myth, to recognize the signatures of collapse embedded in our own geological record. This awareness changes everything. Previous civilizations may have approached their moment of testing in ignorance, unaware that they were part of a recurring cycle. They might have seen their challenges as unique, their solutions as permanent victories over the forces of nature. Without the benefit of historical perspective, they had no framework for understanding the true scope of the test they faced. We are different. We stand on the shoulders of all who came before, able to peer across the vast sweep of time and recognize the patterns that govern civilizational rise and fall. The flood stories aren't just ancient literature to us, they're case studies. The vitrified ruins aren't just archaeological curiosities, they're forensic evidence. The impossible precision of megalithic monuments isn't just a mystery, It's proof of capabilities we're still struggling to match. This accumulated knowledge represents something unprecedented in the history of intelligence on Earth. We are archaeologists of our own future, able to examine the debris of previous attempts at transcendence and learn from their failures. The silence that surrounds us in space isn't just emptying void. It's a library of cautionary tales written in the language of extinction. But knowledge alone isn't enough. Understanding the pattern doesn't automatically grant us the power to break free from it. The civilizations that built the impossible monuments possessed knowledge that rivals our own, yet they still fell to whatever forces claim advanced societies. Raw intelligence and technological capability clearly aren't sufficient to navigate the Great Filter successfully. What may be required is something far more elusive: wisdom, the ability to recognize not just what we can do, but what we should do, the capacity to choose restraint over expansion, cooperation over competition, sustainability over short-term gain. These aren't technological challenges, they're philosophical ones. The filter may not test our ability to harness energy or manipulate matter, but our capacity to govern ourselves wisely when we possess godlike power. Consider the trajectory of our own development. In just over a century, we've progressed from horse-drawn carriages to spacecraft, from steam engines to nuclear reactors, from mechanical calculators to artificial intelligence. The acceleration is breathtaking, almost exponential in its rate of change. Yet our social, ethical, and psychological development hasn't kept pace with our technological advancement. We remain, in many ways, the same tribal species that emerged from the African savanna, carrying ancient instincts for territoriality, dominance, and resource competition into an age where such impulses could trigger planetary catastrophe. Our brains evolved for small group cooperation and local threats, not global coordination and existential risks that span generations. This mismatch between our evolved psychology and our technological capabilities may be the true nature of the Great Filter. It's not that civilizations inevitably destroy themselves through war or environmental collapse, but that they reach a point where their tools become too powerful for their wisdom to safely manage. The filter tests not intelligence, but maturity, not capability, but judgment. The evidence from our own world suggests this interpretation may be correct. The lost civilizations didn't simply vanish due to external catastrophes. Many show signs of internal collapse, of social systems that couldn't adapt to rapid technological change. The precision of their monuments demonstrates incredible technical skill, but the violence of their destruction suggests they failed to develop corresponding social and ethical frameworks. The flood myths that echo across all cultures may preserve memories not just of rising waters, but of civilizations drowning in their own capabilities. Societies that achieved incredible heights of knowledge and power, only to discover they lacked the wisdom to prevent their achievements from becoming instruments of their own destruction. Yet these same stories also preserve something else: hope. The survivors who carried the memories forward, who rebuilt from the ruins, who passed down warnings and instructions for future generations. They represent proof that the cycle, while powerful, isn't absolutely deterministic. Consciousness can survive even the most complete collapse, carrying forward the essential spark that makes new attempts possible. The teacher figures described in ancient traditions may represent more than just mythological archetypes or surviving refugees. They could be evidence of something even more profound: the possibility that some civilizations do successfully navigate the filter, transcending their planetary limitations to become something greater. Rather than destroying themselves or simply disappearing, they might evolve beyond the need for material existence, becoming pure information or energy. Such post-physical civilizations wouldn't be detectable by our current instruments, which are designed to find technology similar to our own. They might exist all around us, as invisible to our sensors as radio waves were to pre-technological. Live might not indicate the absence of intelligent societies, the cosmic silence we perceive, but its transformation into forms we can't yet recognize or understand. If this possibility is real, then the teachers who appear in human mythology might be interventions by these transcended civilizations, attempts to guide younger species through the same transition they once navigated successfully. They wouldn't interfere directly, which would rob us of the growth that comes from facing challenges independently. Instead, they would provide subtle guidance, ensuring that the knowledge necessary for transcendence remains available when we're ready to use it wisely. This interpretation explains the curious pattern of knowledge appearing and disappearing throughout human history. Technologies that emerge suddenly, achieve remarkable sophistication, then vanish without trace. Scientific insights that seem to come from nowhere, transforming entire fields of understanding overnight. Artistic and architectural achievements that surpass anything produced before or since. Perhaps these aren't random bursts of human creativity, but carefully timed releases of information by hidden teachers, knowledge parceled out according to our demonstrated ability to handle it responsibly. The pacing of revelation calibrated to match our psychological and social development, ensuring we don't gain power faster than we gain wisdom. From this perspective, our current moment takes on special significance. We're not just another civilization approaching the filter, but possibly the most carefully prepared attempt in Earth's history. All the knowledge accumulated by previous cycles, all the warnings preserved in myth and monument, all the guidance provided by hidden teachers, has been building toward this moment. We are the inheritors of millions of years of experimentation, the latest iteration in a vast project aimed at producing a species capable of transcending planetary limitations without destroying itself in the process. The stakes couldn't be higher. Not just for us, but for the intelligence that has been nurturing consciousness on Earth across geological time. Yet this preparation also represents our greatest advantage. Unlike previous civilizations that faced the filter alone, we approach it with the accumulated wisdom of all who came before. The flood stories remind us that our achievements are fragile. The technological artifacts warn us about the dangers of knowledge without understanding. The megalithic monuments demonstrate capabilities we should aspire to match, not just in precision, but in permanence. Most importantly, the pattern itself teaches us that the filter isn't insurmountable. If it were absolutely effective, consciousness wouldn't keep emerging to face it again. Something about the nature of intelligence, creativity, and life itself ensures that new attempts continue to arise from the ruins of the old. The cycle may be powerful, but it's not perfect. This resilience of consciousness gives us reason for hope even as we confront the most dangerous moment in our species' history. We carry within us not just the potential for destruction, but for transcendence. The same intelligence that created nuclear weapons also produced poetry, music, and art. The same curiosity that led to genetic engineering also drives us to protect endangered species and preserve biodiversity. The filter may test our technology, but our humanity might be what allows us to pass through it. Our capacity for empathy, cooperation, and long-term thinking, refined through millions of years of social evolution, could prove more valuable than any tool or weapon we've developed. The civilizations that failed may have achieved technical mastery, but lost touch with the qualities that make consciousness worth preserving. As we stand at this crossroads, facing choices that will determine whether we join the cosmic silence or begin to heal it, we must remember that we are not just individual humans making decisions about our immediate future. We are consciousness itself, awakening to its own nature and potential. The atoms that compose our bodies were forged in the hearts of ancient stars. The DNA that guides our development carries the accumulated wisdom of 4 billion years of evolution. The thoughts we think are the universe becoming aware of itself. In this light, our responsibility extends beyond mere survival. We are custodians of something infinitely precious, the ability of matter to organize itself into patterns capable of contemplating their own existence. Whether this miracle continues to unfold across the cosmos, or whether it falls silent once again, depends entirely on the choices we make in the coming decades. The ancient monuments and myths aren't just historical curiosities. They're instruction manuals, left by previous attempts at consciousness to guide us through the same transition they faced. The technological artifacts aren't just proof of lost civilizations. They're breadcrumbs marking a path toward transcendence that we can choose to follow or ignore. The whispers from the ruins grow louder now, more urgent as we approach our own moment of testing. They're telling us that the cycle can be broken, that consciousness can evolve beyond the limitations that have claimed all previous attempts. But they're also warning us that the window for transcendence is narrow, that the same powers that could elevate us to cosmic significance could just as easily reduce us to another layer in the geological record. The choice, as always, remains ours. But now we make it with full knowledge of what's at stake, not just for our own species, but for the entire experiment of consciousness in this corner of the universe. The silence that surrounds us waits to be broken, not by the noise of destruction, but by the voices of wisdom finally learning to match their power with their understanding. In the end, the greatest mystery isn't what happened to the civilizations that came before us. It's what we'll choose to become, and whether future archaeologists will find our ruins among the evidence of failed attempts, or whether they'll discover something entirely different. The first clear signs that consciousness can learn, can grow, can transcend the cycle that has claimed all others who dared to reach for the stars. The answer lies not in the stones or the myths or the whispers from the deep past. It lies in us, in the choices we make each day as we write the next chapter in the long story of intelligence awakening to itself in an otherwise silent cosmos. The silence that has enveloped our exploration tonight carries within it one final revelation, perhaps the most profound of all. As we've journeyed through the evidence of lost worlds and forgotten technologies, traced the patterns of rise and fall that mark our planet's hidden history, we've been building toward a single, inescapable conclusion. The cycle we've uncovered isn't just ancient history. It's happening again, right now, in our time. Look around at our modern world through the lens of what we've discovered. The rapid technological advancement that brought us from primitive tools to space exploration in mere millennia mirrors the sudden leaps we see in the archaeological record. The same inexplicable jumps in capability that puzzle us about ancient civilizations are occurring in our own timeline, accelerating at a pace that should give us pause. Consider how quickly we've progressed in just the past century. Our great-grandparents lived in a world of horse-drawn carriages and candlelight. Today, we carry devices more powerful than room-sized computers, split atoms to generate energy, and edit the very code of life itself. The acceleration isn't just impressive, it's unprecedented in the history of our species. yet we treat it as natural, inevitable, as if such rapid transformation is simply the way progress works. But what if it isn't natural at all? What if the same forces that guided ancient civilizations toward their moment of testing are at work again, carefully orchestrating our development toward another critical threshold? The patterns we've identified in the past suggest that technological advancement follows predictable cycles, building toward moments when civilizations must choose between transcendence and collapse. The signs are everywhere if we know how to read them. The same hubris that ancient texts warn against manifests in our casual assumption that we can master any challenge through technological innovation. The same dangerous knowledge that corrupted previous ages now sits in our laboratories and arsenals, waiting for a moment of poor judgment or moral failure to unleash consequences we can barely imagine. The flood myths that echo across all cultures spoke of waters rising to swallow the world. Today, we watch our own ice caps melting, our own sea levels climbing, our own coastal cities beginning to flood with increasing frequency. The ancient accounts of weapons that could scorch the earth find their modern equivalent in nuclear arsenals capable of rendering vast areas uninhabitable for generations. The vitrified stones found at archaeological sites have their contemporary parallel in the glassy craters left by our own atomic tests. The pattern isn't just repeating, it's accelerating. Where previous civilizations may have taken millennia to reach their moment of testing, we've compressed the entire cycle into centuries. The same technologies that once marked the pinnacle of ancient achievement, we've rediscovered and surpassed in a historical instant. Yet our wisdom, our understanding of how to manage such power responsibly, lags far behind our technical capabilities. This mismatch between power and wisdom may be the true nature of the test that awaits every advancing civilization. It's not enough to unlock the secrets of matter and energy. Success requires developing the social, ethical, and psychological frameworks necessary to prevent those secrets from becoming instruments of self-destruction. The filter doesn't just test intelligence, it tests judgment. The evidence suggests that many previous attempts failed precisely at this point. They achieved remarkable technical mastery, built monuments that still awe us today, mapped the world with impossible accuracy, then vanished suddenly and completely. The violence of their destruction, the radioactive signatures found at some sites, the global nature of the catastrophes recorded in flood myths, all point toward civilizations that gained godlike power but lacked the wisdom to wield it safely. Yet our situation isn't hopeless. We possess something that previous civilizations may have lacked: awareness of the pattern itself. For the first time in Earth's history, a technological species has become conscious of the cycle of rise and fall, able to recognize the warning signs and potentially change course before reaching the point of no return. The ancient monuments and artifacts we've examined aren't just historical curiosities. They're messages, carefully preserved warnings from those who walked this path before us. The precision of their construction demonstrates what's possible when knowledge is properly applied. The violence of their destruction shows what happens when it isn't. The myths and stories that survived carry encoded instructions for navigating the challenges that destroyed their creators. This accumulated wisdom represents our greatest advantage. We approach the test with the benefit of hindsight, able to learn from the mistakes of previous attempts rather than repeating them blindly. The teachers described in ancient traditions may still be watching, ready to provide guidance to a species that shows signs of breaking free from the destructive patterns that claimed all others. But guidance can only take us so far. Ultimately, the choice remains ours. We can continue down the path of unlimited growth and technological expansion, assuming that our cleverness will always find solutions to the problems our power creates. Or we can choose a different course, one that prioritizes wisdom over capability, sustainability over speed, cooperation over competition. The window for making this choice may be narrower than we realize. The same exponential acceleration that brought us to this point shows no signs of slowing. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, fusion power, each represents a threshold technology that could either elevate us to unprecedented heights or trigger catastrophic collapse. The decisions we make about how to develop and deploy these capabilities will determine which outcome awaits us. The cosmic silence that surrounds our planet takes on new meaning when viewed through this lens. We're not just listening for other civilizations, we're waiting to discover whether we'll join their ranks or add our own voice to the great quiet that has claimed all who came before. The test isn't just about survival, it's about proving worthy of the vast inheritance of consciousness that has been passed down to us across billions of years of evolution. In the end, the mystery of lost civilizations isn't really about the past at all. It's about the future, about whether we'll have the wisdom to break the cycle that has repeated itself countless times before. The whispers from the ruins grow urgent now, no longer just echoes of what was, but warnings about what could be. As we stand at this crossroads, facing the same test that destroyed so many others, we must remember that we carry within us the accumulated experience of all previous attempts. The floods didn't wash away everything. The fires didn't consume all knowledge. The resets didn't erase every trace of what came before. Something survived, something learned, something grew wiser. That something is us. We are not just another civilization approaching the filter, but the culmination of millions of years of trial and error, the latest and perhaps most carefully prepared attempt at transcending the limitations that have claimed all others. The question isn't whether we have the capability to pass the test, but whether we have the wisdom to recognize it when it arrives. The ancient monuments stand silent in the darkness, their messages encoded in stone and myth, waiting for us to prove ourselves worthy of their deepest secrets. The technological artifacts scattered across time whisper of possibilities both wonderful and terrible. The flood stories remind us that the choice between renewal and destruction has always been ours to make. What we do with this knowledge, how we choose to wield the power we've inherited, will determine whether future archaeologists find our ruins among the evidence of failed attempts, or whether they discover something entirely unprecedented, clear signs that consciousness can learn, can grow, can finally transcend the cycle of rise and fall that has defined intelligence on Earth since the beginning. The silence waits to be broken, not by the noise of destruction, but by voices wise enough to match their power with their understanding. The cycle continues, but for the first time, we approach it with eyes wide open, conscious of what's at stake, aware of what's possible, and perhaps finally ready to write a different ending to the oldest story our planet knows. The choice, as it has always been, remains ours. But now we make it knowing that we're not just deciding our own fate, but the fate of consciousness itself in this corner of an otherwise silent universe. The whispers from the ruins grow quiet now, their warnings delivered, their wisdom shared, waiting to see what we'll choose to become. In the depths of that silence, possibility waits. Not the possibility of repeating old mistakes, but of finally transcending them. Not the possibility of joining the cosmic quiet, but of learning to break it with voices worthy of the vast inheritance we've received. We are not just another civilization approaching the filter, but potentially the most carefully prepared attempt in Earth's history. All the knowledge accumulated by previous cycles, all the warnings preserved in myth and monument, all the guidance encoded in the deepest structures of human culture has been building toward this moment. The teachers described in ancient traditions may still be watching, ready to provide subtle assistance to a species that shows signs of breaking free from the destructive patterns that claimed all others. But their help can only supplement our own efforts. The fundamental work of developing wisdom to match our power must be accomplished by us alone. The ancient stones have delivered their message, whispered across millennia, through flood myths and impossible monuments, through artifacts that shouldn't exist and maps drawn of worlds that vanished before history began. We are not the first to stand where we stand, to hold such power, to face such choices. The evidence lies buried beneath our feet, submerged beneath our oceans, encoded in the very fabric of our collective memory. Whether we prove worthy of this inheritance, whether we finally break the cycle that has claimed all who came before, or whether we add our voices to the great silence that surrounds us, remains to be written in the choices we make tomorrow. Sweet dreams, and keep questioning.